The forest was silent except for the whisper of wind through the broken trees. A small alien girl, no taller than a human child, crouched in the remains of a shattered pod. Her skin glowed faintly in the moonlight, her large eyes full of fear. She hugged her knees close to her chest, every muscle tense. She had been told stories about humans. Monsters who hunted, devoured, and destroyed. To her, those stories were not just words, they were warnings carved into her heart. Tonight, she saw one of them, a human, tall and broad, walked slowly across the clearing. His boots pressed softly into the dirt, carrying him closer to the ruins where she hid. He carried no fire, no light, only a rough pack on his back and a strange metal object strapped across his shoulder. The girl's breath froze in her throat. Her people had whispered that once a human found you, there was no escape. She pressed her small body deeper into the wreckage. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the human might hear it. The man stopped near the pod. His eyes scanned the ground, then lifted, narrowing at the faint glow of her alien skin. The girl gasped softly, realizing she had been seen. She bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. Was this the end? Would he grab her, tear her apart, and eat her as the old tales said? But the human did not rush forward. He did not roar or bare his teeth. Instead, he slowly removed his pack and crouched on the ground. His movements were careful, almost too calm. From his bag, he pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unrolled it, and the smell of food drifted through the air. The girl's stomach twisted painfully. She had not eaten in 2 days, but fear was stronger than hunger. She whispered to herself, "It is a trick. He wants me to come closer." The human set the food down on the ground a few steps away from the wreckage. Then he leaned back, lowering himself until he sat cross-legged. His hands rested open on his knees. He did not look like a predator ready to strike. He looked like someone waiting. The girl blinked in confusion. Her claws pressed against the cold metal floor of the pod. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. The man stayed silent, his face was worn, his eyes tired. Yet there was something gentle in the way he sat. For long minutes, nothing happened. The only sound was the girl's shallow breathing and the distant cry of night creatures. Slowly, her hunger grew unbearable. Her small body trembled. Her mouth watered as she stared at the food. The human must have known. He closed his eyes as if to sleep. His breathing grew slow and steady, as though he had forgotten about her. The girl waited, watching him for any sign of a trap. At last, she crawled out of the shadows. Her tiny hands moved carefully across the dirt. Step by step, she sniffed the air. Her eyes flicked toward the man, still motionless. When she reached the food, she snatched it quickly and retreated into the wreck. She devoured the meal with desperate speed, every bite burning down her throat. The human opened one eye just slightly. He saw her small silhouette moving in the dark. He smiled faintly but said nothing. When she finished, the girl pressed her back against the wall. Her body was shaking, not from fear now, but from the strange kindness that made no sense. Why would a human give food and not harm her? Why would he wait and let her eat first? Her mind fought itself. The stories said humans consumed everything weaker than them. Yet this man had given her food. He had not moved when she approached. He had shown patience instead of violence. Still, she dared not trust him. Her world had been cruel too many times before. The night stretched on. The human leaned against a broken tree and closed his eyes again. The girl stayed awake, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She wanted answers. She wanted to know if this was all an act, if he was waiting for her to sleep so he could attack. But deep inside, a tiny spark of doubt began to grow. Not doubt in him, but doubt in the old warnings she had believed all her life. When the moon shifted behind clouds, a sound stirred in the forest. Low growls echoed between the trees. The girl froze, her head snapping toward the noise. From the darkness, eyes shone. Hungry, red eyes of predators circling the clearing. Her pulse quickened. She looked at the human, who was already rising to his feet. His hand reached for the weapon slung across his shoulder. The girl's breath hitched. In that single moment, her fear twisted into something new. The danger was real, and it was not from him. It was coming from the shadows, and as the predators crept closer, she realized with shock that the only thing standing between her and death was the very human she had feared most. The fire never came that night. The human did not light one, perhaps to avoid drawing attention, or perhaps because he had grown used to the cold. Instead, He leaned against a broken tree near the ruined pod, his weapon across his knees. His eyes were half closed, but he was not asleep. He breathed slowly, pretending to rest, but every sense was sharp, watching, listening, waiting. The small alien girl thought he slept. She sat curled in the corner of the wreckage, her thin body glowing faintly in the dark. Her stomach was no longer aching from hunger, but her mind was restless. She could not understand this strange human. Why would he offer food and then look away? Why would he sit so still instead of attacking? She whispered softly in her own tongue. Monsters do not wait, monsters do not share. Yet still she did not trust him. Her kind had always said humans were dangerous. Her parents had been taken by raiders long ago, and the warnings were all she had left, so she kept her distance. Her wide eyes studied every detail of him, the scars along his arms, the dirt across his face, the way his jaw tightened whenever the night sounds grew louder. She saw no cruelty, but she also saw no softness. He looked like someone who had carried too many battles on his shoulders. Hours passed slowly. The forest outside was alive with whispers, the call of distant creatures, the rustle of wings. Every time the wind changed, the girl froze, afraid the predators from before would return. She hugged her knees tighter. Her glowing skin pulsed faintly with her fear. She tried to keep her breathing quiet, but each breath felt like a scream in the silence. The human shifted slightly, his eyes opened just enough to catch her glowing form watching him. He almost smiled, but he stayed quiet. He understood fear. He had seen it too many times before. He knew that forcing words or rushing forward would only push her away. So he did what few others would. He waited. Near midnight, the girl grew restless. She crawled out of the wreckage, her movements soft as shadows. The man did not stir. His breathing stayed calm and steady. She thought maybe he truly was asleep. Her small hands trembled as she moved closer to the food pack he had left behind. She sniffed it, touched it, and carefully pulled a piece free. Her eyes flicked toward him, waiting for the sudden strike, waiting for teeth, claws, or blades, but nothing happened. The man did not move. Not even when she tiptoed back into her hiding place. She ate quickly, crumbs falling against her knees. Her heart pounded, expecting a trap, but all that came was silence. For the first time since the crash, she felt a flicker of safety. It was strange, almost wrong. She pressed her hands to her chest, confused by the warmth spreading inside her. It was not fear. It was not hunger. It was something different, something she had no name for. The human opened his eyes again once she was done. He watched the faint glow of her skin fading as she curled back into a ball. He let out a slow breath. His heart ached in ways he thought long dead. He remembered other children, other small ones who had not survived the wars. He remembered being too late to save them. This time he was not too late. This time he had a chance. The hours dragged on, and though the predators did not return, the forest carried their scent. The man stayed alert. The girl stayed awake as long as she could, her glowing eyes staring at him through the cracks of the wreckage. Finally, exhaustion pulled her down. Her head fell to the side, and her breathing slowed. She slept for the first time in days. The human stood carefully, moving without sound. He stepped around the wreck and checked the shadows, his weapon ready. He circled the pod twice, searching for tracks. The predator beasts had come close, too close. Their prints in the dirt told him they would return. He tightened his grip, his mind already planning how to fight if they attacked again. When he returned to his place near the tree, he glanced back at the girl. She slept like a fragile ember, glowing faintly in the darkness. For a moment, he wondered what her name was, what her story was, and why fate had left her alone. He whispered quietly, as if speaking to ghosts. "You're safer with me, little one, I promise." The girl stirred in her sleep, her small body curled tighter, as if some part of her had heard his voice. Dawn came slow, light spilling through the forest canopy. The girl blinked awake, her eyes widening at the sight of the human still there. She had expected him to leave in the night, or worse, to attack her while she slept, but instead, he sat as before, silent and patient, his face calm, his pack beside him. Her fear did not vanish, but a strange thought entered her mind. Maybe, just maybe, the stories were not all true. Maybe not every human was a monster. But before she could test that fragile idea, a sound in the forest froze them both. The brush rustled, branches snapped. The predators had returned. The man rose, his weapon ready. His eyes locked with hers. For the first time, she saw no hunger, no cruelty, only a warning, only a promise. And in that moment, she realized that whether she liked it or not, her survival was now tied to his. The sound came first like a whisper in the trees, then like a growl rolling low across the forest floor. The little alien girl froze inside the wreckage, her glowing eyes wide with terror. She had heard that sound before, nights ago when her pod first crashed. It was the sound of hunters, beasts that stalked in silence until their jaws snapped shut. The human was already on his feet. His weapon, part blade, part staff, was in his hands. His movements were slow but sure, his body lowering into a fighter's stance. He did not look at the girl, but he knew she was watching. He wanted her to see something different tonight. Not a monster, but a shield. Branches snapped, glowing red eyes appeared in the shadows. 3 of the beasts crawled into the clearing. Their bodies were thick with muscle, their teeth long and glistening. Their breath steamed in the morning air. The girl's small hands trembled. She whispered to herself in her language, "They will eat me. They will eat me first." But the beasts did not lunge at her. Not yet. Their eyes fixed on the human. Sensing the greater challenge, they circled slowly, growls shaking the air. The man's jaw tightened. His body shifted with the rhythm of warriors long trained. He was outnumbered, but he had faced worse. The first beast leapt, its claws slashed through the air. The human swung his weapon, steel met flesh. A sharp cry split the clearing. The beast fell back, bleeding but still alive. The second beast rushed in from the side, jaws wide. The man twisted, barely dodging. His arm caught a shallow cut, blood dripping onto the ground. The girl gasped. Her body shook as she pressed herself deeper into the wreckage. She wanted to scream, but the sound locked in her throat. The old stories came alive in her mind. Humans fighting, humans killing. But now the truth was clear. He was not fighting her. He was fighting for her. The third beast lunged from behind. The man rolled across the dirt, swinging his blade upward. The weapon cut deep. The beast collapsed with a roar that shook the trees. The other 2 circled again, growling louder, their hunger growing sharper at the smell of blood. The girl covered her glowing eyes with her hands, but she could still hear everything: the clash of steel, the cries of beasts, the heavy breathing of the man. Her chest hurt. Every part of her wanted to run into the forest, to escape, but her legs would not move. They were frozen, bound by fear, and something else. The man roared, a deep human cry of defiance. His blade cut across the second beast's shoulder. Sparks flew where steel hit bone. The beast howled and staggered back. The first beast attacked again, jaws snapping. This time its teeth grazed the man's arm, tearing deeper. Blood poured down his sleeve, but he did not stop. He fought like someone who had no choice, someone who had seen too much loss to surrender. Every strike of his weapon was fueled by something heavier than survival. It was fueled by refusal to let another small life be taken before his eyes. The girl lowered her hands just enough to see him. His face was twisted with pain, yet his eyes burned with something she had never seen before. It was not hunger, not cruelty. It was fire, a promise in motion. A promise that he would stand until the last breath. The second beast tried again, rushing forward. The man braced, his blade slicing through the air. This time the strike was clean. The beast fell, its body crashing into the dirt. The final beast snarled, hesitation flickering in its eyes. It stepped back, growling, then turned, fading into the trees. The clearing fell silent. The only sound was the man's heavy breathing and the drip of blood onto the earth. He lowered his weapon slowly, his body trembling with exhaustion. His eyes flicked toward the wreckage. He knew she had seen everything. The girl's body was still shaking. Her small heart beat wildly in her chest. She stared at him with disbelief. He was wounded, blood streaking across his arm and side. Yet he stood tall. He had not touched her, not once. All of his rage, all of his strength, had been given to keep the beasts away from her. She crawled out slowly, her glowing skin flickering like a candle. Her eyes darted between the corpses of the beasts, and the man still holding his weapon. She whispered softly, "Why?" Her voice cracked like dry leaves. She knew he could not understand her language, but she asked anyway. The human looked at her. His eyes softened. He did not speak. He only lowered his weapon and sank to one knee, pressing his bleeding arm. His chest rose and fell heavily, but his gaze never left hers. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. She felt the old stories crumble inside her chest, piece by piece. This was not a monster. This was not the end of her life. This was something else. Something her people had never told her about. The girl stepped closer. Her tiny hand reached forward, trembling. She wanted to touch him, to see if he was real. But halfway she pulled back, fear still stronger than trust. The human noticed, but he said nothing. He only nodded slowly, as if to say, "It is your choice." The sun broke through the trees, light spilling across the clearing. The beasts lay silent, defeated. The man's wounds bled, but his spirit stood unbroken. The girl realized she was still alive, not because she had hidden, not because she had run, but because the human had chosen to fight, and though she could not yet understand why, she knew the world would never look the same again. The clearing was quiet again, but the silence felt heavy. The beasts were gone, their blood staining the dirt. The human stood for a moment longer, then lowered himself onto one knee. His arm was bleeding badly, red soaking through his torn sleeve. Yet his eyes were steady, focused not on the pain but on the small alien girl standing before him. She was trembling, her glow flickering weakly like a dying star. She had never seen anyone fight like that. Not for her. Not for a creature so small and unwanted. Her kind had always told her that humans were cruel, that they took and consumed without mercy. But this man had given food, and now he had given blood. Her small steps carried her closer. She stopped halfway. Her big eyes fixed on his wounds. The human noticed. He let his weapon rest on the ground, lifting his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. He pressed his hand against the cut on his arm, grimacing but keeping silent. He did not want her to see weakness, but he could not hide the pain completely. The girl's chest ached. She had no medicine, no tools, nothing to help him. Her people had abandoned her, her pod destroyed. She whispered something in her language, words he could not understand, but her voice was soft, not fearful this time. Her glowing fingers touched her chest, then pointed at his wound. The man nodded, as if he understood her meaning. He reached for his pack and pulled out a small cloth. He pressed it against the bleeding cut, hissing under his breath. The girl flinched at the sound, thinking for a moment it was anger. But then she saw his face. It was not rage, it was pain. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Her hands trembled as she reached out. Slowly, she pressed her tiny glowing palms over the cloth. The man froze, surprised. Her touch was gentle, softer than anything he had felt in years. For a brief moment, the pain seemed less, not because the wound was healed, but because she was there. The girl pulled back quickly, fear rushing into her again. She expected him to snap, to strike her for daring to touch him. But he only looked at her with calm eyes. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no words came instead. He gave a small nod, a silent thank you. The rest of the day passed with uneasy quiet. The human moved carefully, his body tired from the fight. He gathered wood but did not light a fire. He drank from a flask and offered it to the girl. She hesitated, then shook her head. She was not ready, not yet. Still, she followed him when he left the clearing. Her feet padded softly behind his heavy steps. She stayed several paces away, ready to flee if he turned suddenly, but she never let him out of her sight. For the first time since her people vanished, she felt that staying close to someone might mean safety. They walked until the forest opened into a small stream. The water glistened under the afternoon light. The man knelt and washed the blood from his arm. The girl crouched on the other side, her glowing skin reflecting on the water's surface. She watched him carefully, every movement, every breath. At one point, he slipped slightly on a rock, his injured arm nearly giving way. The girl gasped and stood quickly, her hands half raised as if to help, but she stopped herself. She bit her lip and lowered her hands. Still, the moment lingered between them, a fragile thread of trust slowly forming. That night, he made a small shelter from broken branches. He gestured to her, showing she could stay inside. She hesitated, but the forest noises pressed close, growls echoing in the dark. At last, she crawled in, curling into a ball in the corner. The man sat outside, his weapon across his knees, guarding. The girl could not sleep. She peeked out through the cracks, watching him. He sat still, his eyes scanning the trees, every so often. His head turned slightly toward her, checking she was safe. When his eyes met hers through the gaps, she froze, her heart raced. But he only blinked slowly, calm and steady, like a silent promise. Her chest tightened with confusion. Why would a human protect her? Why risk wounds? Why stay awake through the night? The stories of her people told her to fear, but her own eyes told her something different. As the moon rose high, she whispered to herself, "Maybe he is not like the others." Her words were small, almost lost in the night air. The man could not understand, but he heard the softness in her tone. He closed his eyes for a moment, leaning back against the tree. His hand rested near his weapon, ready to fight again if needed. But his heart felt lighter, just a little. By dawn, the girl had shifted closer inside the shelter. Not too near, but closer than before. She had not realized it, but her glowing skin now reached farther, brushing against the shadows outside. The man saw it when he checked on her at sunrise, and he almost smiled. She had not chosen trust yet, but she had chosen to stay. And in a world of broken promises and endless dangers, that choice was more powerful than anything else. The forest stretched on for miles, thick with shadows and whispers. The little alien girl followed the human from a distance, her glowing skin dim under the morning light. She kept her steps light, ready to vanish into the trees if he turned suddenly. Yet something inside her refused to let him out of sight. The man walked slowly, his wounded arm wrapped in cloth. Every now and then he winced, but he did not stop. His eyes scanned the ground, the sky, the trees, as if danger waited behind every shadow. He moved like someone who had lived too long on the edge of battle. By midday, they reached a clearing with the ruins of an old watchtower. The man set down his pack and leaned against a broken wall. His breath was heavy. The girl stayed near the tree line, watching. Her people's warnings whispered in her mind, but her heart beat with new questions. She wanted to know who he was, why he fought for her, why he gave food instead of taking it. The man pulled something from his pack. A small book, worn and faded. He opened it, flipping through pages filled with strange marks she could not read. His eyes softened as he stared at one page longer than the rest. Curiosity pulled her closer. She stepped out of the shadows, her tiny hands gripping her knees as she crouched nearby. The man noticed but did not move. He turned the book so she could see. On the page was a simple sketch. A child, not alien, but human, smiling, her eyes widened. She pointed at the drawing, tilting her head. The man's throat tightened. He touched the picture gently with his fingers. His voice was low, filled with sorrow. "She was my daughter." Of course, the girl could not understand the words, but she understood the pain in his eyes. He closed the book carefully, as though it might break. He looked at the girl, then at the forest, and then back at her glowing skin, slowly. He raised his hand and pointed to himself. "Exile," he said softly. His voice cracked on the word. The girl tilted her head, confused. The man tapped his chest again, then drew a line in the dirt. He placed one stone on one side, and himself on the other. He tapped the stone side and shook his head. Then he tapped his chest again, and pointed to the lonely side. The girl's eyes widened. She understood enough. He had been cast out, alone, abandoned by his own kind, just like her. She hugged her knees, her heart aching in a way she had not felt before. She whispered softly in her tongue, "Alone." The man looked at her and nodded slowly, as if even though they did not share words, they shared the same wound. That night, as the fire finally burned, the girl sat closer than before, not inside his shelter but near the warmth. The flames painted her glowing skin in soft colors. She stared at the human as he cooked something over the fire. Her nose twitched at the smell. Her hunger pulled her forward. The man broke the food into two pieces. He placed one on a flat stone and pushed it toward her. Then he leaned back, showing he would not take her portion. The girl hesitated, staring at him. Her people had said humans never shared, but here he was sharing again. Her trembling hands reached out. She grabbed the food and nibbled carefully. Her eyes stayed fixed on him the whole time, waiting for a trick, but no trick came. He only chewed his portion quietly, glancing at the trees now and then. After a while, the girl's fear loosened, just a little. She whispered something in her language, a sound almost like a name. It slipped from her lips without thought. The human raised his head, looking at her curiously. She pointed at herself, repeating the sound again. It was her name. The man's lips curved into a faint smile. He repeated the sound, rough but gentle. She blinked, stunned. He had said her name, not perfectly, but with respect. Her glow brightened slightly. For the first time, she felt seen, not as prey, not as a burden, but as herself. The fire crackled, the night deepened, the human leaned back, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. But before sleep took him, he pulled the book out once more. He opened to another page, a sketch of stars and a small ship. He touched it gently, his face shadowed with sorrow. The girl tilted her head. She pointed at the drawing. Then at the broken pod she had crashed in. The man nodded slowly, his eyes darkened. He whispered something too soft for her to hear. His pain was heavy, but in that moment, the girl understood more than words could tell. He had lost his family, his people, his home, but still he had chosen to protect her. As the fire dimmed, the girl curled closer to the warmth, her glowing skin flickering softly in the dark. She looked at him one last time before closing her eyes. In her heart, fear was still there, but beside it was something new. Trust, fragile and uncertain, but real. And in the silence of the night, the bond between them deepened, not with words, but with choices. The next morning broke with heavy clouds, the forest smelled of wet soil, and the air was thick with silence. The little alien girl awoke to the sound of the human packing his things. His injured arm was stiff, but he moved with quiet strength. She blinked her glowing eyes and sat up slowly, still half hidden in the branches of the shelter. He glanced at her once, gave a small nod, then started walking. She followed, her small feet padding softly across the earth. Her heart carried less fear now, but it was not gone. Every step reminded her of the warnings of her people. Humans cannot be trusted. Humans will turn on you when you are weakest. They walked for hours, stopping at a wide river. The water rushed fast, carrying broken branches downstream. The human built a small raft to cross. His hands worked quickly with vines and fallen wood. The girl watched, her eyes wide with amazement. He built things as easily as he fought. When the raft was ready, he gestured for her to step on. She shook her head, fear flickering in her chest. What if he pushed her into the river? What if this was the moment the stories came true? But his eyes stayed steady, calm. He stepped on first, showing her it was safe. After a long pause, she followed, gripping the wood tightly. The raft swayed, water splashing against her legs. She gasped and pressed closer to the center. The man steadied the raft with his long pole, guiding them across. Halfway through, the current pulled hard. For a moment, the girl slipped, her body sliding toward the water. Her scream echoed across the river. The man dropped the pole and grabbed her, pulling her back with his good arm. His grip was strong, his jaw tight with effort. The raft rocked dangerously but did not flip. He pulled her against his chest until the raft steadied. Her tiny hands clutched his torn shirt, her glowing eyes wide with shock. She had felt death at her back. Yet once again the human had saved her, not harmed her, not consumed her, but saved her. She pressed her face against him, trembling. By the time they reached the far bank, her legs were weak. He set her gently on the ground, then collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. His wounded arm had opened again, blood staining the cloth. The girl looked at him, her chest aching. She wanted to help but did not know how. Before she could act, a shout echoed from the trees. The girl froze. Her heart sank like stone. She knew that sound. It was her people. Figures emerged from the forest, tall and armored, their eyes glowing faintly like hers. Their weapons pointed toward the human. The girl gasped, running forward, but one of the aliens grabbed her arm. Pulling her back, she struggled, her small voice crying, but they held her firm. The leader, an older alien with sharp eyes, looked at the human with disgust. He spoke in their language. "You kidnapped her. You planned to consume her." The girl shook her head wildly. No, he saved me," she cried. But they ignored her. Their old beliefs were strong. Humans were monsters, and this one was caught with their lost child. The human raised his weapon slightly, his face calm though his body bled. He knew the truth would not matter here. His kind had been hated for generations. Nothing he could say would change their minds. They bound him with rope, forcing him to his knees. The girl screamed, tears streaking down her glowing cheeks. She pulled against the soldier holding her, but he tightened his grip. "You don't understand," she shouted in her tongue. "He fought for me. He gave food. He bled for me." But her clan only shook their heads. One soldier hissed, "He tricked you, little one. That is what humans do. They trick and consume." The girl's chest ached. Her trust felt like glass in her hands, fragile and ready to shatter. She looked at the human. His eyes met hers, steady even in chains. He did not fight. He did not scream. He only nodded once, as if telling her not to be afraid. The leader raised his hand. "Take him. He will pay for what he has done." The soldiers dragged him away, his boots scraping against the dirt. The girl cried louder, her small body twisting against the arms that held her. But no one listened. No one believed her. That night, she sat in the camp of her people, food untouched before her, her small body shaking with silent sobs. She could still see his blood, his tired eyes, his quiet nod. The man who had fought beasts, built a raft, and carried her back from death. They called him monster, but she had seen the truth. Her mind screamed with one thought only. If she did nothing, he would die. And as the moon rose over the forest, the little alien girl made a fragile but unbreakable decision. She would save him, even if it meant turning against her own clan. The campfire burned low, shadows dancing across the alien camp. The little alien girl sat alone, her food untouched, her glowing skin dim with sorrow. She could still see the human's face in her mind, calm, steady. Even when they tied his hands, he had not begged, he had not cursed. He had only looked at her, giving her one silent message: do not be afraid. But she was afraid, not for herself, but for him. Her clan planned to execute him at sunrise. They called him a deceiver, a kidnapper, a monster. Yet she knew the truth. He had fed her, carried her from danger, fought beasts until his blood stained the earth. He had saved her again and again. Her small fists clenched, her heart raced. She whispered to herself, "If I do nothing, he will die." The thought was heavier than her fear. For the first time in her short life, she felt something stronger than terror. Courage, quiet as a whisper. She slipped from the camp. The guards did not notice her small figure in the shadows. Her glowing skin dimmed as she pressed against the trees, step by step toward where they held him. The human sat bound to a post, his arms tied behind his back, his head lowered but his body still strong. He raised his eyes when he heard her small footsteps. For a moment, surprise flickered in his gaze. Then something else, hope. She rushed to him, her tiny hands tugging at the ropes. Tears filled her glowing eyes. "I will free you," she whispered, even though he could not understand. Her fingers scraped against the knots, but they were too tight. Her hands trembled. The man shook his head slowly. His lips moved silently. No. He didn't want her in danger, but the girl refused. She shook her head fiercely, her glowing face set with determination. "I will not leave you," she whispered. The sound of boots echoed. A guard appeared. His eyes narrowed as he spotted the girl. "Step away," he barked. His hand reached for her arm. But in that moment, the girl did something no one expected. She turned and shouted, her small voice carrying across the camp. "Stop! He is not a monster." The camp fell silent. Every head turned. The clan's leader stepped forward, his eyes sharp. "Child, you are tricked. He deceived you." The girl's tiny body shook, but she stood tall. "No!" she cried. Her glowing skin brightened with fierce light. "He gave me food when I was starving. He fought beasts when I was too weak. He bled to keep me safe. Does that sound like a monster?" Murmurs spread among the aliens. Some frowned. Some looked uncertain. The leader's jaw tightened. "He is dangerous. He must die." The girl's tears rolled down her cheeks. She stepped in front of the human, spreading her arms wide. Her voice broke but did not falter. "If you kill him, you must kill me too, because without him, I would already be dead. The silence was heavy. The guards hesitated. The leader's eyes burned with pride and anger, but he could not ignore the sight. The smallest of their kind standing in defense of the hated human. Her glow shone like a beacon in the night. The human stared at her. His chest tightened. He had seen courage in warriors, but never like this. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Brave little one." Finally, an elder stepped forward from the shadows. His voice was calm. "Let us see his wounds. Let us see if the child speaks truth." They cut the ropes. The human fell forward, his injured arm bleeding heavily. The girl rushed to his side, pressing her glowing palms over the wound. Her tears mixed with the blood. "See!" she cried. "He fought, but not against me, against the beasts." The elder nodded slowly. His eyes softened. He turned to the leader. "Perhaps the stories were wrong. Perhaps not all humans are monsters." The leader clenched his fists, but the crowd was no longer with him. One by one, the clan members lowered their weapons. The girl's courage had broken the fear that bound them for generations. The human sat weak but alive. His eyes met the girl's, and for the first time he smiled. Not faintly, not hidden, but fully. It was a smile of gratitude, of respect. The little alien girl reached for his hand, her tiny glowing fingers wrapping around his scarred one. She whispered her name again, louder this time. He repeated it softly, his rough voice shaping it as best he could. Her glow brightened, filling the night. From that moment, everything changed. The clan no longer looked at him with pure hatred. The girl had planted doubt in their hearts, doubt that maybe, just maybe, humans were not what the old stories claimed. The girl leaned against him, exhausted, her voice soft. "You are not a monster. You are my protector." The man closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling with tired breath. He had been many things in his life. Soldier, exile, wanderer, but tonight, he was something he had never been before. He was trusted, and in the glow of a child's courage, two worlds began to change.